folks, my name is Janaki.
And this is Madame Bathsheba.
And together we are Catomancy Tarot. So welcome. Today we are filming my top 10 tarot decks of all time. So ages and ages ago, I know Katie Flowers did the Only 10 Decks tag, and that was before I had a YouTube channel. So way back then I made like an Instagram post about it, but I never actually filmed a response. So today we're going to do my top 10 tarot decks, which is a little bit different than her Only 10 decks because that includes both Oracle and Tarot. And today we're just gonna talk about tarot. And so it's a little bit of a longer video today because, surprise, I can talk a lot about my favorites. So come on, settle in, and then later on I'm going to, it's hard, at top 10, it's hard. So I also filmed a little runners up video with my like 5 decks that didn't quite make it but were really close. So that'll be coming out soon. And then also coming soon, I'm going to film this with my top 10 Oracle decks of all time. So stay tuned for that, and I'll probably also end up doing a runners up for that one as well. But with that being said, grab a warm beverage, settle in, and let me show you my top 10 tarot decks of all time.
Really quick disclaimer before we get started. A lot of the decks that I'm about to show you are either out of print, vintage, or hard to find. But they're still my favorites, and I still really want to talk about them. So if that's something that, isn't quite your cup of tea, I just wanted to give you a heads up. I know this video is probably a long time coming, and that's okay. Let's get into it. So I am gonna kind of try and do these in an order of like the top decks, like essential decks, and kind of like work my way down from there. So we're gonna start off with the number one. I'm not gonna count you down. We're gonna start with my all-time favorite because I don't think it's gonna be a surprise to absolutely anyone who has spent time on my channel. And my very favorite deck of all time ever is the Spolia Tarot. And if I could only ever have one deck for the rest of forever, in some strange hypothetical world, it would be this one. It would be this one, and it would be like an easy choice. Like, this would not be a hard choice. And I'm so sad that it's not going to be reprinted. Like, I would absolutely love to have a backup copy of this. I think one of like my biggest regrets is like not getting a second copy when I had a chance. But alas, at least I have this one. And one of the reasons it was like my all-time favorite, this was my very first indie deck that I ever bought back in like 2018. And I was still like really getting into tarot at that point. I wouldn't say I spoke fluent tarot. And this little white booklet is the booklet that I basically like taught myself card meanings of, and it's so beautifully written, and it's been like so influential in the ways that I've just learned to read tarot, and like I've practically memorized the little white book. And if this is the Jessa Crispin has also written another book. Let me just grab. So if you can't get your hands on this little guy, she's written the Creative Tarot, and there's like there's some color plates from the deck in there. And I don't love this as much as I love this, but you still get to hear her words. But like the words for me are part of what makes this deck so so good for me. And I think it's part of it's because it was like an early part of my tarot journey. And I love the cream borders. I like how thick and papery it feels. I I'm a huge, like, this is the deck that really launched my love of collage decks. Um, and it feels like so personal. It feels, yeah, I love everything about it. Like there's not really a card in here that I haven't had some kind of experience with over the years. And it's a deck that I continue to use like fairly regularly. I have a little basket full of decks on my bedside table. And this is one that like whenever I need, sometimes it's fun to like play around, you know, use whatever you're kind of like the newest thing or whatever you're like stoked on or getting into at the time. But whenever I know I need a big reading that like is going to be really like meaningful to me, the Spolia kind of never lets me down. It never misses for me. And it's just so pretty. And yeah, one of my like biggest regrets is not having a backup copy, because this is the kind of like cardstock that like it shows bends and stuff. And my copy is like it's heavily used. Let's see. So there are kind of like visible signs of wear and tear. It's holding up okay, but like this is a deck that I want to be using like on my deathbed. And so I'm really like I'm looking to get you know, hopefully many more, you know, years out of this one. And so it's you know, still a grad student on a grad student salary. So this deck goes for like outrageous prices on the secondhand market. So like I don't know if a backup copy is like achievable for me. So this is what I got. And so, but I'm still not like, I try not to be too precious with it because it is my favorite. So I'm gonna use it. And I'm not gonna, you know, it's never gonna go out of the rotation for me. It's really pretty. And I do have an art print from this deck. I have an art print hanging up in my office of the death card, which I think is so lovely. You know, I wish, you know, we'll see what happens, but like for some of these indie decks that have like closed shop forever, like what if they did like a 10-year anniversary edition or like a 25-year anniversary edition, you know? That would be so cool. But alas, but I love it so much. Favorite deck of all time. I know the back so well. Like I can tell whether it's upright or reverse based on these tiny little snippets. I love the purple. Yeah, I just I love it a lot. I love it a lot. So that's number one. Not a hard call by any means. The second deck here, which I think is actually like my number two, is a deck that I didn't think I would ever be lucky enough to find a copy of. It's a vintage deck, and that's the Kenlar Tarot. So this deck has become really meaningful for me for a number of reasons. And I first came across this deck on Naha's channel, Naha from 22 Teachings. This is a deck that she's worked with for the past, I don't know, like 15, 20 years of reading or something like that. And I admired it from afar for so long. And it was like, I don't know, I guess I found out about it in 2018, and I don't think I got my own copy until like maybe 2021 or 22. So it was like years of yearning, and I finally found a copy, and then I found another copy. So I actually do have a backup of this deck. So this is my backup. I've never shuffled this one. And then this is I found like the larger, like German box set of this one. And it also has a very thick white book, and I eventually want to get the reprint of this deck that now has those like blue borders, so I can get the full-sized English, like fully translated English guidebook. And I think this is probably the most beautiful tarot deck ever. Full stop. It's painted by Dr. Emil Kenlar, who was trained in the Persian style miniature paintings. He was Persian Hungarian. I think he lived in Budapest for many years. And each of the 4 suits have a different sort of mythological association. So with the swords, we get Egypt. With the cups, we get stuff from Hungarian mythology. The majors are just like out of this world beautiful. And then, let's see here. Ooh, come on now. The pentacles are from kind of Persian mythology. Here we have I think this is from one of the tales, like 1001 Tales, right? And then lastly, let's find some. The wands are from Hindu stories. Like here we have Krishna with the gopis. And this is the 13th unnamed card. This deck, it just does such a beautiful homage to like tarot history. At the same time, he's doing his like whole thing. We always, I always hear that a deck like Margaret Peterson took what, did it take like a decade or 20 years for her to paint? I can't remember which one, but I would love to know how long this deck took Emil Kenlar. If anyone knows, I'm super curious. This is a beautiful card, and it kind of pays homage to the Thoth with all of our zodiac signs there. It's so beautiful, and it has like many of my all-time favorite depictions of the majors, including this one. This is like an all-time favorite. They're just so gorgeous. And there's something about this deck that also feels like very potent and very magical. Like this is again, this Fool card, one of my all-time favorite Fools of all time. And it feels kind of, while the Spolia for me as a reader always, it always hits, but there's something about that deck for me that's kind of like very comforting. It's a deck that I use for like self-soothing in many different kind of contexts. And this, for me, this is like a big magical working kind of deck. Like you get this out when you need something a little special. And I don't read with this deck for other people often. It's a deck that there's something about it that I think this is like one of the most magical decks that I have in my collection. And I'm so happy to have it. And it's like this and the Spolia, like I would, I would from a burning building, I would grab the Spolia and my cat. and that's these are my most precious possessions I have in the whole wide world, and so that's the Kenlar. And eventually I do want to get the full guidebook. I've looked up a lot of the stories individually, or there's enough to go on from the little white booklet to get me pretty far, and I'm already familiar with a lot of the stories, but it's another one of my all-time like favorite moon card, like up there. So beautiful, really into it. But it was one of those things where, like, I literally never thought I would be so lucky to find a copy of this deck that was like I could afford, and so I found it once on Facebook Marketplace, and then I found a copy that was even cheaper on Amazon, of all places, and I didn't believe it until it was like in my hands that it was like a pristine copy, and I was like, no way. So if you've got a unicorn deck out there, I know it can be like really disheartening to kind of have your eye on something for so long, but be patient, keep looking, and I hope it finds you, whatever it is that you're looking for. The next deck I'm going to show you is another one of my all-time favorites, and that's the Ritual Tarot by Tira May. And I feel like this is a deck that has lots of people have a lot of really strong opinions about this deck. So I just want to kind of table all of that. And I found this deck kind of very early on. This copy that I have is like the very first edition that she did. It didn't come in, this is before she had the box. So this just came in like a black velvet drawstring bag. And this is one of like the first like run of gilded decks that she did. And this is the copy that I use the most. But this is the copy that has kind of the worst cardstock, in that there's not a lot of protection, and it shows wear and tear quite a bit. And so you'll probably notice from the decks that I'm showing you today, I like decks that are kind of a little bit timeless or a little bit out of time. I like decks that are like, I struggle to find decks with a lot of contemporary imagery that I really love, and I have found some of those that are like collage style images, but my favorite decks are decks that do feel a little bit more like have like ties to like history and mythology and the sense of kind of like deep time. And this is a deck that does that for me. I don't know. There's something about this deck that I really like what she's doing. But the voice of this compared to like Spolia for me is a deck that always, even when like the readings are you don't always get cozy readings from tarot. That's why we use it. But the voice of this deck does feel a little bit colder than other decks. Like, there's something about this deck that captures a little bit of like, just like, I don't know, kind of like the untold mystery. There's a little bit of like terror of the universe in there, for like a sprinkling of that, that I don't know quite how to put my finger on. And I also, but I think it's really beautiful. I've gotten to know the images quite well. I've read with this deck for lots of folks, and I know it's like a weirdly divisive deck on TarotTube, but I still really love it, and it's in my top 3, and I'm so sorry, but that's how I feel about this one. And my main copy lives in this bag. If you, I'm going to be showing a lot of my own deck pouches that I make myself, and I do have an Etsy shop, so if you see something you like here, check out my Etsy shop. I'm in school right now, so it's been a little bit harder to find time to make all of those pouches for you guys, but I think there's a few still up in the store, but keep an eye out if you like what you see. There'll be more in the future. So those are my top 3. The next 3 decks, I'm going with the strict only 10 rules here, which means there's no like give me's, there's no freebies. So the next 3 decks are my version of the classics. So I've got an RWS, I've got a Marseille deck, and I've got a Thoth deck, and these are my like top 3 versions of those. So for the longest time, I thought my favorite Rider-Waite-Smith deck was going to be this one, and this is another deck that took me ages and ages of just being patient to find a copy, and this is the Golden Rider. And I'm, as you'll see, with the Kenlar, this deck, and a few others in my top 10, all have these like really pretty like gold borders that I'm a sucker for. And I actually, I think this deck looks better on camera than it does in readings in person. Like on camera, it feels like the illustration style is like, I don't know, on camera it looks a little, it's funky but still charming, but in person sometimes it just looks awkward. But I still really love it. But recently another deck that I, was worried I would never get my hands on is what I think is the most beautiful Rider-Waite-Smith clone of all time. It's the JK Tarot. The J and the K stand for Jupiter King. This was a deck that was originally printed by Alexandria. Let's see here. Well, he went by Jupiter King. He's a Japanese artist born in Kobe, and I think the original deck was printed in the 70s, and it was recently had a really small, limited Indiegogo campaign to fund a reprint, and so that's where this came from. So I just got my copy this week in the mail. One of the reasons I held off filming this video until now was so I could include this deck. But the print run was done by Tarot Collectibles. The campaign is closed. I don't know if there's a few copies left, if he'll be selling them on his website or not. But I was so bummed because my copy came from the UK, but like the box was torn, the top was bent, this was like caved in, and then the back is like all banged up, and I was so sad. In anticipation, I also like made a matching pouch because I'm a nerd, and like I love the green and purple box, so I made a pouch. And the deck itself, I've tried to like massage out the damage, but like the first 6 cards in the deck had this big ding up there, and on the top too, and on the back you can kind of see the damage there as well. So I reached out and They offered to send me a replacement copy. I just had to pay for shipping. And I'm so grateful because this is another deck that like I feel so strongly about. This is a deck that like this is the Rider-Waite-Smith deck that I want to read for people for the rest of my life. Like this is it. Like, and I know it so strongly. So now I guess I have a head start on having like a really beat up copy because it came beat up. So I guess this is gonna be it's a sign that like this is like this copy I already don't need to be precious with it at all. It wants to go places and go out in the world, I guess. But I think it's so, I love the colors. I love that it's still got all of Pamela Coleman Smith's like symbolism and imagery. It's like all still there. But it's just in, I think it's just been taken to another level with this particular illustration style. I love this hermit. The colors are just so beautiful and so vivid. Yeah, I love the 70s of it all. And I'm so stoked that it's finally here, you guys. I've been wanting a copy of this. Again, this is another one that I wanted for years and years and years. Lots of there's gonna be a lot of I should have put like a warning that there's a lot of yearning in this video. But like the violets, I love the violets and the pinks, and the red skies are so striking. But like, you know, all of the stuff is still there. It is like truly a Rider-Waite-Smith. And I love it a lot. You know, there's even bonus, like there's a bonus dolphin, a bonus sphinx. This card, so beautiful. You know, this card also really beautiful. Like the skies in this are really good. So brooding. I just like we get some more stuff in the aces, which is really fun. And this is my my Rider-Waite-Smith. I think it's like we still have the snail, we still have the bird. It's just extra beautiful. We still have her rabbit. So like all of the like, you know, as people who are trained with Rider-Waite-Smith, we come to know like the tiniest details like really intimately well, and to find an RWS that kind of like still has all of that good stuff in there, but is just that extra bit special is really exciting. So this is my that's my Rider-Waite-Smith here. So the next absolute like classic, have to have it, is a Marseille deck. And over the, you know, over the past couple years, it's a system that I've really enjoyed learning all about and getting into. And I think studying the Marseille and how to read a Marseille deck has made me a better reader overall. There's some, you know, classic types of cartomancy that I think is really transferable. And this is my favorite. This is my favorite Marseille deck. It's mass market by Piatnik. It's the Tarot de Marseille by Piatnik. And I like the yellowed. I like the color scheme. It's still super limited. And this is a weird kind of like I think the engraver was Ignatius Krebs. It's also sometimes called the Tarot of, is it Renan? Something like that. I don't know how you pronounce that, but like this is my one of my all-time favorite hermit cards. He just looks like a monk. He's got his coat. He looks like you interrupted him in the middle of the night and he had to put on his big woolly thing all around his ears to come out and be like, "What you need there, youngin?" I don't know. It's just the faces are really expressive. The line work in this feels there's just kind of a flavor to it that I really, really enjoy. It's a thicker cardstock too, which I also like. And I just love like the teal, the blue, this like orange red, and this like gold color scheme. I think it's all really pretty. And I have a growing, ever-growing Marseille collection, but just in terms of like color scheme and a deck that I just, yeah, I don't know. I love the three of, um, I love the three of swords in Marseille decks because, you know, we're used to seeing the heart with like, you know, we're used to seeing the Rider-Waite-Smith version, but the way I read Marseille is that I associate, you've got the suit and then there's the numerical associations, and sometimes you can relate the three also to the major arcana. So a three would be related to the Empress, and threes are often about growth. And this is kind of intellect. And so you have this kind of like, you have the idea kind of the ace, right? And then you've got the growth that's kind of sprouting from it. And I think it'd be really cool to get a Marseille Three of Swords tattoo. I think that'd be so good. And as like a you know, someone who is trying to be an academic, like having a card that kind of means intellectual growth. There's something I really like about that. So if I had more money, uh, maybe I'd get some tarot themed tattoos. And there's another deck in my top 10 that I'll show you guys that would be another one that I would get something from. And this is one thing that's fun about this one is it's like halfway. It's one of those weird in between type Marseille decks where it's halfway between a type 1 and a type 2, which are just kind of different classifications based on the imagery in the majors and minors. And you can, like, the moon is one of the ones that you can kind of see that from, as well as a few of the others. And I just, yeah, there we have the name here on the Two of Cups, and I love this one a lot, and my cats come to say hello too, and like I always think that this guy just looks, he's a little cross-eyed, and he kind of looks like a walrus. He's really fun. And then another one of the majors that I always get a little bit of a giggle about. I like that the Fool, I associate the Fool with the element of air. Speaking of you know, we've got the little cat here, and my cat's come to say hello. Sometimes I'm talking at my camera and she thinks I'm talking to her, so she needs to come be involved. But it also, it's got one of these like upside down hanged men, because usually, you know, this, for this to be number 12, this has to be the orientation of the card instead of this, which I think is a fun kind of printer's error. And then we've got the kissy-faced emperor. And like, you know, in a tableau, you'll have the empress, and then the emperor, and the emperor's looking over at the empress, making a little weird kissy face, and I just get a kick out of it. So this is my favorite Marseille deck of all time. I've got a version that I keep in my office in one of my little pouches on campus. And then I've got this as a backup copy. All right, the next deck is a Thoth deck, and for those of you who have been tuning in recently know that I recently got a new Thoth deck that I'm really stoked about, and it's Thoth is a system that I've always kind of struggled with a little bit. I have a Crowley Harris deck that I mainly use as a study deck, and I appreciate the imagery. Like, I understand what Crowley's trying to do there, but for some reason or another, like, it's never been a deck that's really, excuse me, madame, that's really like spoken to me, like outside of like learning about it as like an intellectual pursuit. It's never like struck a strong chord with me in my own personal practice in the same way as the Marseille or the Rider-Waite-Smith has. And I recently got a hold of this deck. It's the Alchemy of Thoth by Annie Farrar, and it just came out. I've only been working with this deck for about a couple weeks since it came in, but it's made my top 10. And that's partially because, like, I think it's important to have all three systems represented in your top 10. I recently just edged it in this kind of like goldy black color. These are the backs. I love that Thoth himself has like a strong presence. I love these backs. I think they're so good. And, you know, I think that there's I've heard a little bit of kind of like mixed feedback around this deck. I think for some folks who are Thoth people, like through and through, there's things that don't like always match up. So it's unlike the JK Tarot, which is truly a clone. This is not quite a full clone. You might notice that, like, usually when there's a pentacle for the fives, it's actually turned upside down because it's important that, like, matter is above spirit. Like, that's part of what's going on, so there's things like that I think for, like, people who are diehard Thoth people, they might want it to be a little bit more Thothy than it is. But I, as someone it's never been my number one system, like I can still pick up on some of the things that aren't there. But for me, it doesn't get in the way of wanting to work with this deck in the least. What I love about Annie Farrar's collage work is that it's so textural. And my favorite part of any Thoth deck is actually I'm really into it's the minors that are my favorite part of that system, and because they're abstract, there's something that she brings that's like so textural that I really like, just like the texture, and I like her the representation of the suits that she has that are these kind of blocky figures. Like I like that. And I've been really enjoying this deck. And there's still there's totally nods. Like we've got the severed head down here in the Queen of Swords. So like there's totally nods to the original without it being a one-for-one clone. And although I think I was watching Thea's video of this recently, and she was she felt like, you know, Knight of Wands is all fiery, and then this feels super watery. So there's like a few that uh, are quite different from the original. But for me, I was so stoked to get this deck because it feels like a deck that fits into my ecosystem of decks that I love to use a lot. And I'm someone who I'm really big on deck pairings. If I can't find a deck that will play well with the other decks I already like, then it's not a deck that I'm going to reach for all that often. And for me, I think that was partially what was going on with the Thoth is like, I know a lot of people love to pair that with all kinds of things. But for me, it never really fit into my favorite kind of decks, which are like collage decks, for me at least. And so to get a Thoth deck in my favorite art style that feels so textured and still is like, has enough going on where it still does have a lot of that original symbolism there. I was just so over the moon to kind of like feel like I finally have a Thoth deck that really speaks to me. So I'm so stoked to have this. I've picked up a couple like Thoth books I have my Thoth copy that I'm kind of like so it's encouraged me to do more of a Thoth study. So I've got my Thoth deck that's in order that I use as like a study copy alongside this one, which I've been like using a lot recently to try and get into it. And I just think the images are so beautiful. So this was a limited pre-order this summer, but she is talking about doing a reprint of this and her other deck, Daydreaming in C2, maybe towards the end of the year. So if this is a deck that you missed out on or that you're interested in, I think she's going to do a reprint. This is on like Make Playing Cards smooth cardstock, which it's a big deck. So it makes it really easy to shuffle, but it would be nice to have it on something that's a little bit more sturdy. But I don't mind the cardstock so much. I'm just like literally so stoked to have a Thoth deck that I can finally like really sink my teeth into. So I'm stoked. My only other thing is like I wish it was just a tad shorter. Because there feels like there's extra space above and below the words here. So depending on if she does end up doing a reprint, and it ends up being on different cardstock, then I might trim the copy that's on the MPC cardstock to have like a little smaller copy that I can take and use out in the world. But I think it's so beautiful, you guys. And this is another one where like this feels, it's just so beautiful. Sorry, yeah. But it's, you know, it's another one of these decks where the imagery feels very old. I don't know. So those are my like my three classics. That was my Rider-Waite-Smith, that was my Marseille, and that was my Thoth deck. The next deck I'm showing you is on my top 10, but I have never once used it to do a reading. Wild! What? But it still has a huge place in my personal practice, and this is a deck that I use only for altar work. And that's this giant deck. This is the DRAXO Tarot by Greg Traw. I think last time I checked, I think this one might still be available, but for scale here, it's like 3 regular tarot cards all stacked together. That's how big this is. So it's enormous. You can't really shuffle this deck unless you like dump them out all on a table and do one of these washes. But I use this for altar work. These cards are always kind of the backdrop to my altar, and I usually what I do is, let me show you guys. So I've got my little planner here, and every year at 22 Teachings we do this big Wheel of the Year spread where you use all 78 cards to do a reading for the whole year. And so each of these pie wedge represents the cards you get for that particular new moon cycle. So we're currently over here. It's about to be a new moon. So once the new moon rolls around, I'll switch out these. So you get a major, a court card, 3 minors, and then like a bonus card that's left over. So you get 6 cards each new moon cycle. And so that's what I've been using this deck for. And my altar, maybe I'll insert a little picture here, is the first thing you see when you walk in my door. I'm going to have to zoom out on this a little bit. It's the first thing you see when you walk in the door, and it just like greets me. And so like this is a deck that I have just gotten to know over the years that I've had it. I think I've had this deck since I think I got this in 2020, so I've had it for a while now, and I really love it. I love it a lot. So what I'll do is I keep it in order except for the cards that have already happened this year, and then at the start of the new year, I put everybody back in order. So I can find all the cards, but this is a deck that is really big on color coding. Not so much of it is in order anymore because we've made it through so much of the year. So I'll keep these in order still, but you can see his goal with this deck was to kind of like make a really esoteric deck and force you to, instead of like sometimes it's hard to even know what card you're looking at, but I've become really familiar with like how to with the cards. So you kind of really have to like lose yourself in the card a little bit, and then you see the 0 and you see the air and you see the aleph, and you just know that that's the Fool. And so it can get a little bit tricky with the minors, especially. Here's some of the majors. We've got the Devil here. We've got our Judgment cards. We've got, and this is the, there's a second Fool card, or this is the DRAXO, so the 00. And then all of the minors have this like wonderful color coding. So these like pinks into darker reds are for the wands, and so you'll see the number there, you'll know the color, you'll see kind of like wand-like objects, and then you'll see the like we've got Venus and Aries, so you know it's a fire card, right? If you know the deacons, then you'll also be able to identify it. But it's definitely the kind of, there's so much going on that you kind of like lose yourself in what's going on a little bit, which is really fun. And I just think it's so cool and like really layered, and there's a lot of different types of imagery. I love all of this, like, I don't know, it feels like super metal. he's got these like, I don't know, you could see this being the album cover easily, like some 80s D&D kind of stuff. Along, like, this one's so beautiful. This is the 2 of Cups. really, really cool. But yeah, it's a deck that I use for only for altar work, but like I couldn't it's still like a really central part of my practice. So where the last three decks I showed you, the are decks that I use a lot for other people in readings. My top three were decks that are really personal to me in my own readings. But this is never a one that I would like, you know, uh, bring to see a friend, getting coffee to like whip out for a quick little reading. No, this has a purpose in my home, and it's still one of my top decks. So it's just not a deck that I use for readings. There he is. All right, so that is that one. And that leaves us with just 3 more decks in the top 10. And the next one is another deck that I use kind of mainly for myself. I'll pull it out for other people sometimes. But as you'll see, it's not a deck that's for everybody. This is the Abyssal Tarot. It's an underwater photography deck. You've seen this on my channel before, most likely. And this is a deck that is really, really beautiful, but heads up, there's a lot of nudity. So if that's something that you're not into, maybe skip forward. And it's just really, really pretty. It's very ethereal. I love the colors and the blurriness, and I love the kind of the half gold, and it just feels like very sensuous. And I'm a Cancer with a Taurus moon, so this kind of like watery landscape really speaks to me. So this is a deck that's very emotional for me. And I think it's so, so beautiful. And so this is a deck that I think I got this at a similar time that I got the last deck I've showed you. So I got this in 2020. So it's been another deck that I've worked with for a long time. And yeah, it's one of my all-time faves. I really love it, and it's fun because it has these little on the side. It has the original name of the artwork, and sometimes there's not a whole lot you can do with those. Like this is just a woman's name, and unless you know Chantel in your life, it probably won't mean much to you. But something, on the other hand, something like faltering voice, that is like a keyword that you can kind of use to kind of overlay. You can, take them or leave them, but that's another kind of fun aspect of this deck. It has some confronting cards. It also has there's a little bit of like, this deck also feels, it has its queer moments too. Which is also very fun. But yeah, this is kind of like this is my like Cancer, I'm in my feels, cardinal water, very emotional, very pretty. And I'm into the decks with I'm into the gold borders. I'm into it. So that's the Abyssal Tarot. And yeah, I don't know if this is if you're surprised by any of these, but this has got to be up there. Okay, so those first, I guess, 8 decks that I've shown you were like the top 3 were easy. The next 3 were also kind of easy because you got to have one of each. But these last couple slots were actually really hard for me to think about filling. it was, yeah, really hard call for me. Um, and so the next decks that are in these last two spots aren't decks that I've honestly reached for much at all recently to do readings, but they're decks in my collection that I would never give up, and they had kind of the time and the place for me. One of them is the Barbara Walker Tarot. This is a deck that I got really early on. I think after I think I had my Rider-Waite Smith since middle school, and then the next decks I really got were the Spolia and Barbara Walker. Like that was like how I got started with tarot. I have a trimmed and edged copy, and it's it's iconic. It's just so iconic, and just because it had, even though I reach for this these days. It's kind of more of a seasonal thing. I feel like this is like old school, like old school goth vibes. It's kind of spooky. I reach for it more in this time of the year. Around fall, October, Scorpio season, Halloween. But it's not one of my main readers anymore, but I still think it has to make my top 10. Because it's such a classic. And it's just a little guy, but it's a deck that I read with a lot when I was, so it was another one of those like formative decks for me. And even if I'm reaching these days, I'm reaching for other decks, like other decks I might get more use out of. I couldn't. I've had this one so long that I couldn't let it give up its spot. And I've talked about, I think in other videos, I've talked about, I love the aces. I like the keywords in this deck. It feels like a blend. It's blending it's blending the three systems in an interesting way. You've got like Marseille influences, you've got like Thoth influences, you've got definitely Rider-Waite Smith influences. You've got a bleeding moon. Like it's just yeah, even though yeah, this is one of the ones that I kind of like hemmed and hawed about for a long time, but like I had to include it. I had to include it. And then the last deck is another deck that I don't reach for to read with all that often, but it's another one of like my little tarot treasures. And I adore it. And so it's in the top 10, even if I reach for others more often to read with. And it's the Agoro Tarot. This is another deck by Piotnik. This was printed in 1992. Was born in 1992, so I feel like connected to this deck in that way. And this is a deck in kind of a Russian painting style, with these beautiful gold borders that by now I'm a sucker for. And this is the other deck that I would totally get tattoos from. Like I really want this this death with this weird horse, even with this like funny little hand and like weird swamp business. Like this is another one that I would really love to have. And it feels very folksy. I love the colors in this. This is another card I would consider getting. I love this moon. I love this like weird devil. I love the chartreuse horse. A while ago we were doing the one deck gone wild tag, and this is if you want me to hear more about me talk more about this deck, I'll link that video below, because I really do a deep dive on this deck there. But it just feels folksy. It feels like it's a good deck for readings because it's like the images are very kind of evocative and kind of fortune tellery. It's a really thick cardstock, but it chips really easily. So I think this is another one of those decks that I feel kind of precious with. But it's pretty sturdy. And I just yeah, it's another one that it feels important to me. So it made my top 10. And that, folks, that's my top 10. What do you guys think? Were there any like big surprises? Anything you were surprised wasn't in there? Let me know. I know this was like a long time coming, but those are my top 10. And stick around. I think this turned out to be a very long video. No surprise. Oh, you know, you gotta talk about your favorites. I guess it's gonna take a while. So if you're still here, thank you. I might film another, like, my runners up. I've got some runners up. If you're curious, that will probably be out soon. And then I'll also probably make a top 10 for my Oracle decks as well. So that's what we've got going on. So thank you so much for sticking around for all of that. I hope you guys have a lovely rest of your day, and I will see you all next time. Bye for now.